Hello, everybody. Welcome to Economics Monday with the Honorable David M. Walker. I'm Nick Pallavito. I will be your host for today's program. And today we're going to be discussing a bill that just got passed in Congress, at least by the House, and that was the $95 billion relief that Ukraine was waiting for. And we're going to be joined by Ivan Kurchenko from Ukraine, from Kiev, who's going to be discussing what the Ukrainian view is, and also Dr. John Lockwood, who's former U.S. military intelligence. But first of all, we're going to bring in the former Comptroller General of the United States to discuss this bill package. Is it necessary? We know that Margie Taylor Greene is pulling her white hair out, but other than that, nothing else is happening. But let's bring in former Comptroller General of the United States of America, the Honorable David M. Walker. David, welcome to your show. We have a big bill that just got passed, and we want to get your thoughts about what's going on here.
Well, first, there were several bills that got passed. In fact, one of the decisions that the Speaker, Mike Johnson, made was to unbundle the bill because people had different feelings about each component of the original bill. And so we broke it down into three primary parts. There actually is a fourth, four parts. One was Ukraine, which was over 60 billions, primarily for military aid, but some for humanitarian assistance. Another one for Israel, about 26 billion plus. And then another one for Taiwan, which was about 8 billion plus. And the last one had to do, among other things, with TikTok. The fact that TikTok needed to sell to U.S. investors, within a year or so, or else they would be banned in the United States. And that passed overwhelmingly. All of these bills passed comfortably, but interestingly, the Ukraine aid, while it passed comfortably, a majority of Republicans voted against it. And I think the primary reason that the majority of Republicans voted against it was not because of the merits of the Ukraine aid, because my personal view is that we needed to provide assistance to Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan, although they're very different circumstances. I think the primary reason that a majority of Republicans didn't vote for it is because of what Speaker Johnson didn't offer. He did not offer a bill on the border. The number one or number two issue among Americans of concern in the 2024 election is border security. And so a lot of people were concerned that we're providing a lot of money for others to try to be able to secure their borders and in some cases reclaim their territory, but we're not providing, the money and other instructions that are necessary in order to secure our own border. And I think that was a mistake. I think that was a big mistake, and it may come back to haunt the Speaker. But who knows? We could see something come down the road. So bottom line, Ukraine needed the aid. But the real concern is, how is this going to end? I felt since the beginning, and I hope I'm wrong, but I felt it's going to end in a stalemate. It's going to end very much like Korea did, where they just stop fighting at some point, call an armistice, people stay where they are. The Ukrainians don't agree that the territory that Russia is occupying is Russian. The Russians don't agree that it's Ukrainian. They just stop fighting. And we'll see whether or not that's the case. But I know one of the concerns, and one of the things that's in the bill, it's my understanding, is push the administration to say, what's the end game here? At what point in time do we quit just throwing money at the issue? Although I will have to say, last thing is, Ukrainians have done phenomenal. I mean, they have done a phenomenal job, and they clearly degraded the Russians. And if Russia ever had any thought about trying to take more territory, I think that's gone, because they've been embarrassed and degraded so much. There's no way they're going to want to take on NATO. They do not want a direct confrontation with the United States and NATO countries. And anybody who says that they do, I think, is deluding themselves. All right, I'll leave it at that to start, Dick.
Okay, well, we're going to bring in our panel from around the world. First of all, we're going to bring in Sasha Starr, who heads up the famous show Ukraine, Russia, and China, originally from Odessa, Ukraine. So he's a little bit familiar with being there, as they would say. We also have Dr. John Lockwood, who lives in Washington, D.C., where you're at, David, who's former U.S. military intelligence in Washington, D.C. We also have Ivan Koshenko, who actually lives in Kiev, Ukraine, who actually is also one of the panelists on our show, Ukraine, Russia, and China. And then we also have Rick Rosner from Los Angeles area. I always like to go to the horse's mouth first, which normally would be Sasha. But since Ivan has joined us from Kiev, Ukraine, what is going on in Ukraine right now with this bill that just got passed by Congress? It looks like it's going to go through. What are the thoughts over in Kiev, Ivan?
Hello, Nick. Hello to everyone. Nice to be here with you. Actually, people here are excited because we waited too long for this bill to be issued, but I myself is not so excited till it will pass the Senate and be signed by President Biden. So I will celebrate. Actually, I'm glad to celebrate at the moment when the American weapons will arrive to Ukraine, but unfortunately, I will not know when it happens, when it will happen. Though some American officials are saying that they will be ready to supply Ukraine with the weapons within a week after this bill will be signed by the President Biden. But what is said in all this situation, it's about the time which passed till that the bill was approved by the Congress and hopefully will be approved by Senate and signed by President Biden, because during that time we lost more territories, we lost more people, our energy infrastructure was destroyed. The recent strike on Ukraine, when the largest Ukrainian power plant, which is just on the other bank of the river near the place I'm living, was destroyed, and it was destroyed due to the lack of air defense systems, which led to the long term with approving this bill. And this is really sad when Ukraine became a hostage in some political process which were going in the United States, and and we didn't receive that help in time. So we lost. It's just about money, and it's not the give not the largest sum of money in terms of the American budget. But we lost too many lives during the time, and people lives they can't be compared to any money. And another thing is that Russia seen that the help actually to Ukraine may be delayed, and that Ukraine, without help from Western countries, from Western partners, will not be able to efficiency defending of our territories and our energy infrastructure and our cities. And this gives them a sign that they can influence the further help from maybe European countries, from the United States, because in this case they will have better chances on the battlefield. That's really sad.
Okay, we'll also listen to Sasha Starr, who used to live in Ukraine and also heads up the show, which is the Ukraine, Russia, China show. What are your thoughts, Sasha?
Thank you, and I'm so glad to see Ivan from Kiev and Professor Jonathan Lockwood here on the show, so we can discuss it in a really meaningful way in all details. Now, what strikes me is one very interesting thing. You can do to your opponent or enemy, you can do so much damage by poking him with one finger, then another one, then yet another one. And there is a very different effect when you have all fingers in a fist. And in a fist, you can do considerable damage to your opponent. What's happening so far in the Western, and particularly the American weapons reaching Ukraine, that it was a system of a finger here, another finger there, so a little bit here. Oh, it was delayed. It came actually 2 months later than it was supposed to. Well, things happened. Okay, logistics and some other stuff. Then yet another shipment came even later. And my greatest concern is that whatever has to reach Ukrainian battlefield will not come all at once. And here, Ukraine could mount a very successful offense against Russians. If that's not going to happen, it will be more of the same. So it will be a package which will be designed to help withstand Russian attacks for another few months. Nothing more, nothing less. That's my greatest concern, especially when you think about that the last war, it will be Biden's. And we know that Biden's strategies again for Ukraine is very uncertain. Okay, he can fight with Republicans that they are opposing help, and we need to help Ukraine, and so on. But when it comes to sending actual arms, weapons, he has his own thoughts and his own way of dealing with the problem. That's another obstacle that I see has to be somehow overcome. That's about my thoughts. And Jonathan, of course, please correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah. We'll bring in Jonathan Lockwood, former military intelligence in Washington, D.C. How's this going to change the military balance over in Ukraine, or will it?
Well, it will eventually. But what happens is that this passage of this particular bill represents a perfect example of the American checks and balances system in operation. The people who are complaining about the way the current process works, they really shouldn't, because this is the way that the founding fathers of this country intended the process to work. And as James Madison put it, ambition must be made to counteract ambition. This prevents the American political leadership from moving very quickly in any one direction simply because of the checks and balances that are built into the system. So that the shall we say, political food fight that you saw taking place in the American House of Representatives is a perfect example of this. And eventually, true to the American system, they arrived at a compromise. In other words, where everybody got a little bit of what they wanted, but nobody got everything they wanted. So, yeah, the Russians, by the way, interpret compromise. They translate it as mutual surrender. They put a negative connotation on compromise. But in the American system, compromise is everyone meeting everybody else halfway. Everyone gains something a little bit. So this bill is a perfect example of that. It muddles through. It reminds me of one of those old Western cowboy movies where the cavalry comes riding over the hill just in the nick of time to save the good guys, in this case, the Ukrainians, who are waiting desperately for that help, and they're getting it just in the nick of time, apparently. And so this is what will happen. There are already signs, as Sasha and Ivan and I have observed in previous programs, that the Ukrainians are preparing and recognize that the key to this whole campaign is to sever the logistical and administrative link and reinforcement link between the Crimea and Russia. Sever that link, destroy the bridge, cut off the Russian occupiers in Crimea, which then leaves the Russian occupiers vulnerable to a Ukrainian counteroffensive into Crimea to force the surrender of the occupying Russians. This is all the arrival of this aid will tilt the balance that much further in the favor of the Ukrainians. they will be able to halt what limited gains the Russians have been able to make thus far. And as the Ukrainians continue to successfully incorporate the various kinds of military aid they are receiving, and by the way, this is not taking place in any kind of a really organized fashion. It's all ad hoc because nobody in the West really anticipated this kind of a situation developing. So they've had to respond with what they have. So now I predict that within the next 2 to 3 months, the Ukrainians will be in a position to inflict a decisive operational counterstroke, which will inflict upon the Russians an unmistakable military operational defeat, one which they will not be able to excuse or explain away. Oh, we intended to lose the Crimea. No, they will be. I have a minor disagreement with my colleague Dave Walker that while I agree it could end in an armistice, not a peace treaty, but Ukraine, I contend that Ukraine still has an opportunity with proper timing and execution to inflict a decisive enough operational defeat upon the Russians so that Ukraine gets back most of their occupied territory and would actually be in a position with additional NATO reinforcement to force the Russians to withdraw entirely from Ukrainian territory. And that's my take.
Jonathan, I agree. If they will overtake Crimea, Ukrainians, that ends the war, right?
Yeah, that's the center of gravity.
Yeah, I would agree with that, but let's go back in history a little bit and recognize some facts. There's something called the Budapest Agreement, which was signed between Russia, the United States, the United Kingdom, and Ukraine. And the basis, it was in the early 1990s, and the basis of that agreement was that if Ukraine gave up its nuclear weapons, because it had the second most nuclear weapons in the former Soviet Union, that Russia, the United States, United Kingdom would guarantee Ukraine's sovereignty. Russia took Crimea in 2014. Obviously, they violated the agreement. The U.S. did nothing. The U.K. did nothing. If you want to deter aggression, you have to penalize past aggression, and you have to do things in advance of actually crossing the border. The U.S. failed to do that, and others failed to do it as well.
They failed to learn the lessons of Munich, 1938.
Right. Ivan, the bill's going to pass in the Senate. It's going to get signed by the president. I think there's little doubt about that. The frustrating thing is, on both sides of the pond, by that I mean the Atlantic, okay? On your side, the frustrating thing is, why didn't this happen 6 months ago? And I very much appreciate that. On this side of the pond, it's also frustrating because in the end, the reason that it was held up so long is twofold. One, they wanted to leverage it for border security in the United States. And they didn't get border security as part of this deal, which I think is
legitimate concern. Yeah.
It's a bit,
all part of checks and balances. Yep.
Legitimate concern. Something should have done on it. The second thing is that, you may have noticed, Ivan, that we have a $2 trillion deficit, 35 trillion in debt, another 85 trillion in liabilities and unfunded promises. And so there's frustration in the United States about when are you people going to start paying for stuff? When are you going to start, U.S., not you. When are we going to start putting our finances in order? My personal view is I was all for this aid, and I think it should have happened a lot quicker. I also think, though, that we should have done something on border security. We can come back to that if you want. And this should have been paid for. This aid should have been paid for because all we're doing is adding on. I'm talking about by the U.S. Should have been paid for either with a surtax and or cutting other spending. If it's that important, and I would argue it is, then we ought to be doing some things to make sure that we're just not digging the hole deeper.
What idea? Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, David.
Can I ask a question? Here's my concern. First, our military-industrial complex has got a limited capacity. These weapons are going to come in installments. They're going to come in installments because some of them have to be produced. All right. And that doesn't happen overnight. Secondly, what about the restrictions on the weapon? I mean, the Biden administration has restricted how certain weapons can be used. Is that the case again? And what, if any, impact is that going to have? And thirdly, what about Ukrainian manpower? You know, what is the situation with regard to Ukrainian manpower? I will tell you this. I don't see how Putin can survive if he loses Crimea. And my biggest concern is, as I've said for 2+ years, would he use tactical nuclear weapons if he thought he was going to lose on the battlefield? That's my biggest concern. So let me stop at that.
Okay, well, maybe we should address that with Dr. John Lockwood, since you're former U.S. military intelligence.
Let's toss the grenade back to Dr.
We'll toss the
Thank you, Nick. I'll remember that.
To you.
Thank you.
Okay, will he resort to tactical nuclear weapons, Dr.
Now, that's a very interesting question, because the tactical nuclear weapons would have to be delivered using medium range missiles, and not strategic necessarily. And what's interesting is that the ballistic missile defenses that are present and soon to be delivered to Ukraine have proven to be extremely effective in knocking down almost all of the missiles that are directed against Ukrainian air defenses. What's interesting about that is that this reinforces the Russian fear of the Patriot system, which, according to my research, has existed ever since at least 1985, because when they thought that Patriot was the leading edge of the strategic defense initiative. They overestimated the importance of Patriot, but it shows how much they fear the potential of American technology to neutralize the one thing that makes Russia a great power in its own perception, their nuclear missile arsenal. And that provides an important clue to a long-range counter strategy to permanently halt the threat of Russia from the east. As Sasha and Ivan and I have discussed on our program, if the United States decides to upgrade its Space Force with a space fleet, and by the way, where would they buy the space fleet from? SpaceX. They upgrade it with a space fleet armed with laser weapons in low Earth orbit, which would be capable of shooting down or destroying nuclear missiles in their boost phase, something which we do not have right at this moment. But if we acquire that capability, then the U.S., along with the NATO alliance, will be able to construct a global ballistic missile defense system which can neutralize the nuclear arsenals of Russia, as well as China, North Korea, and even Iran, as a nice little bonus thrown in. And so that checkmates the entire process and basically creates the potential for creating strategic stability in Europe. And oh, by the way, in today's news article, Poland has indicated its willingness to have nuclear weapons stationed on their territory. It's also interesting because Poland has also indicated in the past that they would be willing to have ballistic missile defenses also stationed on their territory, both of which Russia has reacted extremely negatively against. But you keep in mind that Russia puts far more relative importance on its nuclear missile arsenal as a means of great power status, as well as for applying pressure against the West.
How powerful are Russia's tactical nukes compared to the Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombs?
Okay, good question, right? The thing about tactical nuclear weapons, tactical is a relative term, because if you're in the country that's having tactical nuclear weapons fired at it, those aren't tactical; they're strategic. And the thing is, the yield of typically of these so-called tactical nuclear weapons can range anywhere from about the power of the Hiroshima and Nagasaki bomb, 15 kilotons to 20 kilotons, but they can be as high as 100 kilotons or more. Not necessarily thermonuclear weapons, which would be several megatons. The tactical nuclear weapons would be in the tens to hundreds of kilotons. And so, but they would be delivered by missile, and they would therefore could be, at least in theory, mostly destroyed by the ballistic missile defense systems of Europe, with the ones we have that are capable. So it's a very interesting question.
If one, they fire 10 of them. If just one gets through, that's a bomb that could kill tens of thousands of people and sterilize many square miles.
Yeah, mostly is not exactly a comforting word when you're talking about nuclear weapons.
Yeah, I have the same question. Actually, David said that Ukraine gave up our nuclear arsenal by the Budapest Memorandum with the security guarantees from the United States, from the Great Britain, Russia. Russia violated that memorandum in 2014 when annexed Crimea, and United States and Great Britain did nothing actually. And what United States, Great Britain, our other allies will do in case if Russia will attack Ukraine with tactical nuclear weapons? What, in your opinion, should be the reaction from the United States, from the Great Britain? Will they enter this war and use their armed forces to put Russia on their place, or what? Or they will do nothing? They will they just gather the useless United Nations Security Council and discuss that it's not okay for a member of United Nations Security Council to use nuclear weapons on the country which doesn't have nuclear weapons? What the reaction should be from the United States, from Great Britain, in your opinion?
I believe
Sasha, you have your hand up, so we'll go to you next.
I think that was Ivan. It was answered by British and France, the representatives, back 2 years ago, after the beginning already of war, in February 22. They said to Putin that he personally will be killed instantly in case of Russia using tactical or whatever nuclear weapons. And that was emphasized more than once. I don't know if anything changed in this doctrine, but I would like to illustrate Russian problems of what's happened in just a couple of days ago in Iran, what Israel did. Because Iran and Russia have very similar air defense systems and many other measurements, Israel easily penetrate the all air defense system, and not only just Iran, but first Syria, then Iraq, then Iran. There was absolutely nothing that could deter this Israeli attack, and they spectacularly showed the backwardness and useless of the Iranian air defense system. Same is with Russia. Ukrainians are highly effective of attacking the Russian oil producing plants and many other topics like warehouses with weapons and so on. And Russia has no defense whatsoever against that. So Russia is very backward country as the military is concerned. All they have is enough they're getting the drones from Iran, maybe China, and they have some weapons like missiles, and that's it. They have no defenses whatsoever. That's how Ukraine will win this war.
Does this latest aid package include fighter jets? It doesn't look like it to me. And would that change the outcome? Looks like Denmark and Norway are giving a bunch of fighter jets, but I don't see that we are.
Biden hedges. Biden keeps hedging. And listen, he is a president with almost 100 years of experience, so he knows better.
The bottom line is Biden is weak.
He is.
Biden is our 21st century equivalent of Neville Chamberlain.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the difference is Neville wasn't prime minister, but
Yeah. Yeah, there is that.
yeah.
But one other thing I would add is that the introduction of very sophisticated and robust ballistic missile defenses into Ukraine will also, what it has also done, it has introduced greater uncertainty into the minds of Russian military planners. Any Russian military planner who is even contemplating a nuclear strike of any scale against Ukraine or the West in general now must take into account the ballistic missile defenses and their increasing sophistication and the potential for them to become global. Once you introduce ballistic missile defenses into the equation, you introduce greater uncertainty into the mind of a potential attacker. Putin does not know now where if he launched a nuclear strike of any scale, he does not know how many of his missiles would actually get through the defense. He does not know which ones will get through. What he does know is that because their own defenses are not nearly as robust or as sophisticated as those of the West, that they would be subjected to a devastating nuclear counterstrike by the combined nuclear forces of the US and NATO, which when you put them all together, they do number greater than Russia's. And that would have a decisive effect, particularly if Russia lacks the confidence that its nuclear forces could inflict any decisive damage on the West.
Do you have to use a missile? Could you deliver one to a coastal city via a boat? There was a Tom Clancy movie where they nuked the U.S. via a vending machine.
Yeah, the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean...
I don't think the Russians are taking their cues from Tom Clancy. Thank you very much.
I mean, it has to be a missile.
Maybe they should. But we don't want them to.
No.
Yeah. Yeah. Is there an opportunity to project a small nuclear missile through artillery?
Well, the United States during the Cold War, keep in mind the United States did produce very small nuclear warheads. They even had nuclear landmines at one point. And at one point during the 1950s, if you want to go back that far, the United States produced the Davy Crockett, which was the world's first and only Jeep-mounted nuclear weapons delivery system. The problem with that system is that the nuclear warhead it delivered had a blast radius greater than the weapon's maximum range. It's like dropping a hand grenade in front of yourself. Yeah, a little bit of a shortcoming there, but yeah, that's how desperate the United States was back during the 50s to have any kind of a nuclear deterrent against a Soviet invasion of Western Germany.
What about manpower, Ivan? What's the situation with regard to Ukraine's manpower to be able to mobilize a significant counterstrike, even with the weapons?
Actually, the information about the Ukrainian army and the mobilization process is top secret. All I knew is that at least the upgraded bill of mobilization was signed in Ukraine, and it may improve the process of mobilization because after the more than 2 years of war, we faced the situation when everyone who wanted to join the Ukrainian army on a volunteer basis, they already joined Ukrainian army, and everyone who were in the first rows of defending Ukraine. And now this process of recruiting must be improved, balanced, and that's what now is Ukrainian government is working on. But as for the specific numbers, I don't have any information. Here we are discussing that Russia is going to mobilize like 300,000 of additional manpower for their summer counter strike, their major counter strike on Ukraine. And President Zelensky, in his recent interview, as well as the head of Ukrainian Defense Intelligence, Krilo Budanov, said that we are ready for their movement. So hopefully, when we will be defending against their attack, we will require less manpower than they will have to spend in these numerous meat grinders when attacking fortified Ukrainian positions. But we will see.
Have you imposed a draft, and if so, to what age range?
It's now. It was 27 years old, and this age was lowered to 25 years old.
25. What's the maximum age?
Like 65, I think, from 25 to 65.
Thank you.
Hey guys, this is Steve. Just want to thank you all for your insight. And I think the main thing is, I'm sorry I had to wait. There's a lot of people on the show. This is the only news show I have to wait 40 minutes to talk. So just FYI. But I do a lot of news shows, but I never have to wait that long to make a point. I want to thank David Walker for being here. I mean, I think the main thing is, I think all eyes are on this deal, but also the concern about Trump winning the White House, because I think all these efforts, don't you agree, will be, I'll start with Jonathan Lockwood, will completely go the other way if Trump is elected. I mean, will he cancel all this aid? Will he do what he can to pull, any resource out?
Just to answer your question directly, I don't believe there is now a recent indication that is not necessarily going to be the case, because there was an article today about Poland having, one of Poland's leaders having spoken with former President Trump, and indication that there is going to be a shift in Donald Trump's thinking towards Ukraine, as he recognizes, because he did not make all that vigorous an effort to stop the aid to Ukraine bill. And so therefore there is a positive indication that should Mr. Trump win the White House this November, that he is not going to, according to his previous statements, he is not going to automatically yank the rug out from Ukraine. The political momentum of the other NATO allies joining together, which is what Mr. Trump would want. He wants NATO membership to do more of their share in providing for Western defense. That is happening. So therefore, I don't believe that Mr. Trump, should he become president this November, will automatically yank the rug out from underneath the Western alliance.
So maybe
I'm saying it. Your fears are groundless.
And I think I'll close out with this, and I'm just going to listen the rest of the show. I have to leave. But I mean, David Walker does raise good points about the amount of money that we're spending versus other needs. But I think there's also, against that concern, in my opinion, is just kind of the stability of the world order. And, if Ukraine were not to win, it would just be such a damaging ripple effect. Other nations would just say, okay, this is the green light, let's invade. What's going to stop Russia from invading Poland, Moldova, other states within former Soviet Union? I think that's at the end of the day, that's what's at stake here. Correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, I think it's, look at World War II, right? I mean, so David, I don't know what your thoughts are. You're a really good historian. You bring that perspective. I mean, long term here, what are we looking at economically, geopolitically?
Well, let me give you my view. First, Speaker Johnson went down to Mar-a-Lago and met with Trump before he ended up breaking up the bills and pushing him to the floor for a vote. And so Trump was involved in the decision. Trump did not object to the decision. Trump has also tried to calm down Marjorie Taylor Greene to the extent that's possible, and others. And so I think the bottom line is, those who believe that Trump would abandon Ukraine, I think, are off base. There's no way he's going to do that. At the same point in time, he wants to know what the end game is. And that's one of the things that is embedded in this bill. I mean, they're in the bill. I don't know the exact wording. There's language that talks it puts pressure on the Biden administration to say what is the end game here, because you can't continue to do things over and over. Thirdly, what's a win? You say you want Ukraine to win. What is that? All right. Fourthly, I don't believe for a nanosecond, and I haven't for a long time, that Russia wants to take on NATO. I don't believe that. Okay. In a direct confrontation. And I think what's happened in Ukraine significantly reduces the likelihood that he would ever do it, even if he ever did want to do it. Here's my personal view, and then we'll go to Sasha. My personal view is what Putin wanted to do is he wanted to topple the government in Kyiv. He wanted to put in a friendly government to Russia. He did not want to take over Western Ukraine. He wanted it as a buffer to NATO. He wanted to take certain territory east of the river that is predominantly Russian speaking. He wanted to create a land bridge to Crimea. He wanted to annex that, but that was it. That's what he wanted to do. Unfortunately, he thought he would take Kyiv very quickly. Ukrainians thwarted that. Ukrainians have done a hell of a job, so far. And I think, as a result of that, he's got to reconsider what can he do? And that's why I'm saying all parties need to say, how's this thing going to get resolved? Sasha.
David, I will be straightforward, as I usually am. The thought of we would like to know the end. What is the end? Where is the end? This is very sinister question, because it all depends on how forcefully the West and United States would help Ukraine with weapons and other means. If there will be a lot of help and all would be done in a timely manner, we wouldn't discuss that today. Ukraine would win the war, both hands down. Ukrainian army is much braver than Russian, which is demotivated, and it could be easily defeated. And by this hedging from Biden or from Congress or so on, this depletes Ukrainian efforts. And this is why the war is still going on. Number two, listening to you, David, it seems to me that the West would be, if not happy, but quite content if Russia would take over Kyiv in 2.5 days and would install friendly government, wouldn't touch Western Ukraine. That would be because, as you say, the half of Ukraine, or at least eastern part of Ukraine, is Russian speaking. So these people speak Russian, those people it's the same thing like people in France speak French, and half of Belgium, they also speak French. That's so right. Why we don't take over this part of Belgium? Because they're all French speaking, they're our brothers and sisters. Why this should be tortured by Flemish-speaking people? Yes, David, please. What do you want to say?
Yeah, let me. What I'm saying, I didn't say I thought that was a good thing. All right, I don't.
Possible.
All right, what I'm saying is I think that's what his objective was. Okay?
But who cares about his objectives? I'm so sorry. He's a criminal. He's thug. He's torturing his own people. The hell with him.
Let me clarify, Sasha.
Okay.
All right. What I'm saying is that I do not believe, especially now that the Ukrainians have been so brave and have done such a great job, I do not believe that Putin wants to take on NATO directly. That's all I'm saying. Okay?
Disagree. 100%.
Okay, well, all right.
If he is there somehow, there will be armistice with Ukraine. He will start building up his military, and in less than 2 years' time, he will definitely make a provocation in the Baltic republics. Their number one target, not Poland. Poland is next. In Baltic republics, there is a lot of Russian-speaking people. So he will arrange some kind of unrest and some kind of possibly somebody will kill a Russian-speaking person, and he will say, we have to defend our Russian people elsewhere in the world. including Baltic states, and by the way, probably Brooklyn as well. And here we go. We will attack all these Baltic republics. We'll take them over in 2.5 days, and that's the end of story. So now what? Now they're NATO countries. So what? United States will go into thermonuclear war because of the Baltic states? I don't think so.
No, not thermonuclear war, but it would engage more actively.
Okay, so they will send.
Yeah.
They will send.
I think bottom line is Putin can't beat NATO.
No, he can't.
That's the bottom line. Putin cannot beat NATO. That's why I believe what I believe. There's no question.
But
it's now. It's now. It's not going to be the same year and a half, 2 years from now,
Right.
especially if he will get away from Ukraine.
I would tend to excuse me just a second, Rick, and then I'll let you jump in.
Okay.
The point is that Ukraine still has within its power an ability to inflict enough of a decisive operational defeat with the aid that it is soon to acquire, to where they can stop Russia here and forestall a future war. Or start and win this fight to prevent a future fight, a future larger fight. So what it is very incumbent upon the United States, now that it has committed all this aid, for the Ukrainians and along with the NATO or alliance, to defeat Russia's incursion, cut off the Crimea, restore Crimea to the control of Ukraine, and essentially, once the Ukrainians gain air superiority over the eastern half of Ukraine, along with the addition of additional aircraft and reinforcements from various NATO countries, it will then become possible to inflict enough of a decisive operational defeat on Russian forces to compel the Russians to accept an armistice, which essentially is a return to pre-war borders. And that would define about the clearest and most attainable operational and strategic victory for Ukraine. And then after that, you have to be prepared to assist Ukraine in its military and economic recovery and get it into the NATO alliance and the European Union in order to forestall future aggression. If you do not do that, then what we are doing is we are simply creating another Munich. We are buying peace at any price.
So has the war? Sorry, go ahead, Sasha.
Okay,
has the war squeezed out all the corruption in Ukraine? For 20 years after the fall of the Soviet Union, from time to time, Ukraine had very corrupt government. Then there was a revolution that kicked out a corrupt president, Russia-friendly president in 2014, and kicked out a prosecutor. And now it looks like Ukraine is pretty clean. Is that true? And will it stay clean into the future?
Clean is a relative term. Yeah. I mean,
We'll address that. Have Ivan address that. You can get off of the mute. There we go.
This is actually a complex question because unfortunately the corruption is part of the culture. It was part of the culture in the Soviet Union. It's very big in Russia, and that was one of the reasons why they were not succeeded in their invasion to Ukraine, because they just stole more money than they've invested into their weapons. And in Ukraine, definitely now we have a lesser level of corruption than it was during the times of the pro-Russian President Yanukovych. And what we see that all the inspections from the United States, actually it was an inspection of General Controller from the United States, as far as I know, they didn't find any evidences that the Western help is going in not in the right way, especially when we're talking about not money but weapons, because what is important regarding those block of economy is that Ukraine, in majority, we don't receive money from the United States. We receive weapons, and my money are going to the American manufacturers of weapons. They are going to the suppliers of the Pentagon, of the United States Army. They are going to the United States Armed Forces stationed in Poland and in other European countries. If you analyze those bill, which was approved by the Congress, then the majority of those $60 billion is not going to Ukraine. And that's okay, because we don't need money. We just need weapons to protect ourselves. And what is really great in this bill, and it was I forgot to tell about it before, that the Congress added an order to supply Ukraine with long-range ECONOMICS missiles, because for a long time it was a point of negotiation, and President Biden was not going to supply Ukraine with the ECONOMICS. There were some different remarks about it, and now, as it's been placed in the bill, hopefully we will receive long-range ECONOMICS missiles and will be able to strike the targets just beneath the front lines in the occupied territory by Russia, and make our defense, or sometimes our counter-offense efforts more efficient with those weapons. So answering about the corruption in Ukraine, there are 2 points. Definitely the level of corruption is lower than it was before. And the second point, that we receive this help not in money, in real money, but in weapons which are produced by United States manufacturers. So I hope in United States there is no corruption, or its level is pretty low. Not as much in Russia, and the majority of those money, they will definitely be allocated to the producing weapons and bringing them to Ukraine.
We should have zero tolerance for corruption, but it will never be zero. And and Ivan is correct. It's a cultural issue. It's not just a cultural issue, in Ukraine and Russia. It's a cultural issue in many countries, especially countries that have a history of totalitarian leaders, if you will. I mean, even more so. But I think it's important to note that most of the aid that we're giving is military equipment. And as Ivan pointed out, that's where we have the ability to help the most, is to provide military equipment. All right. We do, I think in the latest bill, I think there's several $1 billion worth of economic assistance. I think the general feeling in the United States is that we ought to be providing military equipment, and the Europeans ought to be doing more with regard to the economic side, because that plays to our strength, and it plays to, frankly, what the greatest need is on behalf of Ukraine.
Yeah, Sasha.
I would like to mention that something what I don't understand is that it's already 3 generations of Americans and in the West living in a fear of being attacked by Soviet Union then, and now Russia, with all-out nuclear war. 3 generations. And now, thanks to Ukrainian, they can eliminate the threat once and for all on the cheap. How many American soldiers have died in Vietnam, in Korea, in Afghanistan, in Iraq, elsewhere? Here is no single American is risking his life in Ukraine. And Ukraine can disable and disarm that Russian military machine. It's almost there. So what makes America think, so, well, it's too much money. We don't want to upset Russians. Well, we don't know whether we should do this or that. Where is such paralysis of American willpower happened?
Let me answer you.
Okay.
Ukraine is not going to eliminate the strategic threat the Russians represent.
Yes, of course it will. After the Crimea, Putin's government will fail. There will be a revolution in Russia, and Russia will become, for some estimation, 8 different countries, and in some estimation, as many as 23. We'll see which scenario will happen. Russia will not survive.
But the question is, what happens with the nuclear weapons? People aren't concerned about Russia. They're concerned about the nuclear weapons. As you already said, the fact of the matter is, Russia was never a superpower. The only reason it's a great power is because of its nuclear weapons. It was
Which is what Boris Yeltsin said back in 1994.
Yeah.
You remember the 1991 when Senior Bush was in power and Soviet Union ceased to exist, and you can buy for probably maybe $1 billion all the nuclear arsenal of Russia. If not 1, then 2 billion would do. 3.5 billion would do, just a number. Okay, what's happened right now when Russia will fall apart? All their nuclear arsenal will be taken out of Russia, or whatever remains in the place.
Where does it go?
To the United States. Where else? In the cosmos, if you will.
We can control it.
It's not going to stay in Russia. There is no one. Let's see, even a minimum scenario, 8 different countries out of Russia. No one will be strong enough as to say, okay, we want to assume all the nuclear arsenal and being in charge of it. Nobody will be able to do it.
I like that idea, Sasha, but I'm not sure if we're going to see that during our lifetime. But I do know what we are going to see right now is that we're at the hour, so we're going to have to get going. Want to thank our guest from,
just we're really getting into it.
Yeah, just when we're starting getting into it, we can
pick it up next week.
There you go.
Well, the thing is, we might bring it
Food
back
fight part
It
2.
It depends where this bill goes. I think you're going to get.
I think it's going to pass.
Ivan,
it's going to pass.
Yeah, I think it's going to pass and going to be signed because the hurdle was the House of Representatives.
Yeah,
the Senate is going to clear it.
That was the big fight.
Clear it.
That's correct.
And the big fight's over with. But if there's more of a fight, we'll be back next week. We're one of the few networks actually carry a show on Russia, China, Ukraine, Russia, and China. I noticed the other networks have given it up. It's almost like they went somewhere else. But we're not going anywhere.
They're going now to the Trump trial.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, they're going to the Trump trial. You're right.
They're looking at the latest shiny new object, which in this case is the Trump trial.
Right. But we'll see you next week on Economics with the Honorable David M. Walker, and you'll have some good news this week, Ivan. Take care.
Take care.
Bye-bye.